Hello and welcome to another episode of the CG Garage. This is episode number 276. God, these numbers are getting big and confusing to say, Kristen. But this is with Jim Lammers, who is a really important person, actually, especially in the early parts of my career. His company, Trinity3D and Trinity Animation, has been around for a long time and really helped me when I was first learning 3D and doing things in 3ds Max or 3D Studio at the time, just all the plugins, everything. Trinity was a big resource for me, and Jim was the founder of this company and a really great guy. I really loved having him on the podcast. He was actually going to be a speaker at Total Chaos because Trinity Animation does a lot of cool stuff. And luckily, we were able to have him on the podcast, and we were still able to talk about the amazing things, including the show Archer, which is pretty cool. Kristen, what were some of the things that you enjoyed about this podcast?
Well, I thought it was fascinating learning. They are only a small crew of 10 people in Kansas City, which is
Yes.
where I'm from.
Yeah.
And I feel like they found their perfect niche of fun content and needed content. And they just do so much. I had no idea. They're in every little aspect of the industry.
Right. Yeah. Which is really cool. Really, really cool. I liked Jim. Obviously, is a very, very kind and humble person. They do all kinds of animation, from architecture animation to mechanical animation to Archer to what was it, Starship Troopers? I mean, they've been
Oh,
around for
yeah.
a long time, right? So it's a lot of really interesting things that they do, and I've just always really been admiring, as well as the fact that they've been involved in the software retail business as well. So
Mhm.
great to have Jim on and to talk with him, and really fun to have that part of it. We've got a couple of announcements. What's the quick one that's going on? Something on happened with Revit, just dropped yesterday, right? Or the other day, right?
Yes. Yes, V-Ray Next for Revit Update 1 is now available. And
Cool.
you can find all about this at chaosgroup.com.
Right.
And again, we'll announce the V-Ray 5 for 3ds Max beta is now available as well.
Yes,
And
that's
you
a
can
big
find that.
deal. I have been actively writing blog posts about it. I just put out a blog post not long ago about the new light mixer. So if you guys want to know more about that, just go to our blog section and find out about the light mixer and how to use it. It's pretty great stuff. A lot of really cool things happening in V-Ray 5 beta. So go check it out if you would like to give it a kick the tires on V-Ray 5. It is available for you guys to do that right now. And then do we have anything else? I think we still have our education bundle if you guys are interested in that. Obviously, that is $150 a year. And that is if you are basically in an EDU, if you are academic or you are learning in school, you can get it for $150 a year, which includes all the V-Rays, with the exception, I think, of Nuke and Katana. And then if you or just want to learn V-Ray from Maya, or you want to do it for a personal project or for a non-commercial project, you can use the PLE version, which is awesome, the Personal Learning Edition. It is available for free for anyone. V-Ray for Maya only, but pretty cool. And again, Kristen, if people want to know more about this podcast, where can they go?
You can go to facebook.com/cggaragepodcast or chaosgroup.com/cggarage.
Perfect. And also a reminder that this particular episode and the last couple of episodes are in video format, so you can actually go on YouTube. So go check out the Chaos Group channel on YouTube, and you guys can see the video version of this podcast. Also, we'll be building it up on our Facebook page if you guys want to just check it out on Facebook. So cool, 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 cool. All right. That being said, please enjoy this awesome episode with Mr. Jim Lammers.
Welcome to another CG Garage, where the Chaos Group talks. You'll know it's over when the last bucket drops. We're gonna fire off rays in high dynamic range. We know that ambient occlusion is passe. Global illumination won't lead you astray. And while image-based lighting is really swell, you need to make sure everything has Fresnel.
I should note that Brady, my lawn was excited. I'm recording in my son's room because it's got the most soundproofing because of all the
Oh,
heavy bunk bed furniture. But Lon liked the background of the Nerf wall. So
I love that Nerf arsenal. It's just like,
see,
oh my. That's an impressive.
Yeah, and it goes on for quite a while. There's,
One is dead or alive.
yeah, yeah. So how you been?
Me, I'm doing well. Thank you. Sticking up with it, keeping up with things.
That's good. That's good. Hanging in there. I mean, we're all sort of adjusting to the new normal, but this is, I'm sort of looking at these things as opportunities to find out, new ways of working and what we can learn from this process, because I think that there's a lot of people that have learned, for example, in animation, that they can do a lot of stuff from home if they really had the choice.
We had a few pioneers here. They were saying they could be more efficient and focused at home, and we set it up months ago, years ago,
Yeah.
for those guys, and it was working pretty well. So they kind of pioneered it for our animation team.
Right.
Oh, that's good. So then, when it came time to make the switch, you sort of had everything, at least a system in place that you could switch to.
Yeah, we found one hitch. We didn't realize we had a VPN limit because we never had that many people on at once. But,
Oh,
yeah.
right.
So they can submit right to our render farm, just as though they're connected in here at the office. They're
Right.
working in scenes, saving and sending jobs to the farm and all that.
Well, that's pretty amazing. So let's actually talk about that a little bit. How big is Trinity now?
Well, 10 people work here. Half
Right.
of myself focused on everything.
Yeah.
Debbie Folk and Misty Wayne handling our products division, where we sell V-Ray, as you know, and
Yeah.
3ds Max going back to the 90s and all these kinds of products. And then we have Tracy Spainhour as manager. And
Yep.
then we have 5 artists that work on the projects that come in that she manages. So
Wow, that's actually pretty small considering how influential your company is. I've got to say, I remember Trinity for almost as long as I've been working in
For sure.
in 3D.
Yep.
Like it was the biggest thing, especially when I was doing Max, right? Because when I was doing Max, Trinity was like the place to go to get all the cool plugins that you wanted,
Yep.
right?
Anything Max related. That's
Anything
exactly
Max
what I wanted.
related, it was like it's a very, very important place to go, and an important part of the community. So how
Wow,
did that
thanks.
start? Yeah, how did that start?
I had a passion for animation when I realized how much fun it was compared to. I always like photorealism, starting with watercolor and then later with airbrush.
Yeah,
And you guys might have dabbled in art too. And
Yeah.
A little bit.
started
Yep.
started playing with Pavre, started playing with Vivid, and said, "This is great. I don't have to breathe paint fumes all day," and just loved it. So this is pre-internet, so there was a BBS community that sprang up to support all the interest in 3D.
yeah,
And it just kind of flowed naturally from there. First as a hobbyist, and then as a sort of freelancer. Plus the BBS, it was called the Rendering Plant, and I
Right.
was selling plugins for 3D Studio DOS off of there, and
yeah.
became an Autodesk dealer in '96, and then just both divisions just grew naturally from there, and we continue to be really active as a software dealer and supporter and trainer, in addition to applying those tools. They're both fun. I hate to leave either one behind.
Right.
It's exciting to do both.
Yeah, but I mean, Lon, what was your first experience with Trinity? I mean, obviously it was like a destination. It was a resource for us for that time, right?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of what exact plugins, but I'm sure it was a place that we looked for plugins or content,
Yeah.
materials. And remember, there used to be all those different, like, you could get different texture CDs, and
Yeah.
back when everything was actually on a CD. And
Yeah.
our library, our production library used to have those, like, remember, you used to keep your CDs in like these little pouches, and then you'd take that over to your friend's house or whatever. Like, we had those with all of our software. And in fact, we had those with all of our backups in it too, when CDs finally moved to backup, or backup finally moved to CDs.
Right.
And that was the worst system ever, because, man, you had like 27 CDs of, whatever project it was. And it was like, which one is it on? It hurt.
Max 6 and this plugin version 2, and
Yeah.
trying to keep it all straight. Yeah.
And the worst thing is when you had those old projects that you had back in the 3ds Max DOS days, and you'd keep them on CDs or whatever you had, and then you burned them on CDs, and then you didn't
Yeah.
realize that after 7 years those CDs would stop reading.
or they
Yeah.
get scratched or something because
No, but
somebody,
because the burn CD is actually is burnt into the die, right? As opposed to being glass laminate, which is the traditional CD.
Yeah.
So
with
after about
aluminum.
7 years, you can't read the CDs anymore, and they become obsolete. And they're like, "Oh no, that was the last piece of data that I had of my crappy chess piece modeling that I did in college or something."
yeah.
Like thermal paper. I had all
Yeah.
this turtle wax car wash, car wax to try to get the CDs back alive.
Oh, really?
Oh wow,
Sometimes it worked.
wow.
I didn't know that.
like
That's
it.
a nice hack.
If
That's
they were a
nice-
little scratched, yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty funny.
For whatever reason, that reminds me of the. So a million years ago, I worked at the computer lab in architecture school, and everybody was working in 3D Max DOS, and there was a notorious zip drive problem that would happen.
the
You
click.
would get the zip click of death, and sure enough, like
Or was
that
it
would
jazz
have-
drive?
So a drive would go bad, and then it would destroy everybody's discs, and people would call me over and be like, "Hey, I'm having a problem," and you hear click, 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 and you're like, "Oh no!"
Yeah. 100
Was it like-
megabytes.
Yeah.
They're these thick, they were like floppies, and they were twice as thick, and they had 100 megs instead of 1.4 megabytes.
1.44,
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody started using, these are the answer. And
This
then
is
about a
it.
year later, these are all garbage. They,
Yep.
Yep.
I switched to the SideQuest drives at that point.
yeah.
Of course
those
you
were-
did. Yeah, Chris is always like, whatever was mainstream, Chris is going to go the opposite direction.
A
Yes.
contrarian.
Yeah. Have to be. It's like, you know what? You guys are using this. I'm going to use something slightly different, and it's slightly better, and I'll have
Right.
some
I like
argument
that.
for it. Yeah.
Yep.
And then there's like the only downfall is that no one else is using it.
Yeah.
Like I was the guy who was using OGG audio compression instead of MP3. so
I know it. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's funny.
yeah. So, all right. So let's talk about that. So you basically you've created a resource, you've created a community, you're selling software through here, but you're also doing animation stuff, right? So
Correct.
let's talk a little bit about the animation. What kind of stuff were you looking at in terms of animation?
Currently, what we're active with right now?
Or back then, actually, even.
Oh, yeah. In the early days, as a freelancer, my first projects were for a local agency. I was working on Caterpillar engines for a company that's now called the Frank Agency, and trying to learn how to model with the very primitive tools in the DOS versions, things like engine blocks and stuff like
Right.
that. And I got lucky. I had, on the product side, I had been working for a fellow in California who had these explosion collections. You've seen them all a million times. They use them on the Discovery Channel and all of the television. They had space explosions, and it was a company called VCE. And
Okay.
the guy who ran it was Peter Curran. So he was all Mac based, and I knew we needed something like that for the PC. And I lobbied him to just, for the payment of CDs, let me do a conversion. And Mac to PC was a big complex deal back then.
Right.
And so I got to be friends with him, and he called me up when he needed some effects for a film he was starting called Starship Troopers. So
Wow.
you're just totally serendipitous, and just a great person to work for. Yeah,
Wow.
really lucky.
So what did you do on Starship Troopers?
They Mr. Curran had his own film compositing tools. This is, film compositing with an actual projector. So
Right,
he could
right.
handle all the animation type things, but
Okay.
some elements they needed to do more as a 3D approach, and so that's where they were coming to us. We were on Max 1.0. We did those shots where they run up to a transport and the doors close and the transport shoots down the tunnel. That was
Right.
probably the more complicated shot. So it was all synthetic, the tunnels
Wow.
and all that. It was all at the LA Convention Center, which you guys have been to many times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was where they had the Union Station of Starship Troopers. If you've seen the
Yeah,
film.
I do remember. Yeah, they basically they made it look like a train station or a space station of some kind, right?
Yeah, and you know what? We told them not to dolly back the camera, and they dolly back the camera to get the
Right.
impression, because we wanted to just take that as a plate and just make it recede, down the tunnel.
Right.
But
Right.
we could correct it later. So
Yeah. Yeah, I remember seeing that shot. I was like, wait, did they go to SIGGRAPH?
yeah, you get to know that show hall so well.
You get to know that show from you. Yeah, it's pretty funny. But yeah, that's true. I completely forgot about that. Well, that was pretty exciting. So that was
was.
pretty early in in that.
Yeah, and we're in Kansas City. We're not a showbiz town, so
Right.
it was pretty unheard of in those days to get much if you weren't a little more in the mainstream of California. So
Right.
I had lived out there when I first got out of college. My degree was in electrical engineering, and I worked at Rockwell in Anaheim. So I got a couple of years of living in the Los Angeles greater area, and I liked it a lot.
Yeah, well, it's nice and if you're not stuck in your house all day, every day. I mean, not my house is fine, but yeah, it's a nice place to be for sure. Well, that's great. So, but you've been in Kansas City, I guess, the whole time, right?
Yeah. I moved back here in '89 and founded the company in '94 as a full-time real entity. So 26 years now.
Yeah, and I think I remember going to Trinity back probably on year one.
Yeah.
So it's definitely, that
I'm
was
honored. I had no idea. We've always been big fans of yours. We didn't know you knew we were here. So that's great.
Oh yeah. And
We got
back
your
in
first,
grad school. Yeah, it was
We
big.
got your Nomon training that you did that helped us learn V-Ray and a lot of the techniques.
Yeah.
So we were disciples of yours here in our studio.
So Jim, Chris and I went down to visit Blizzard, a few months ago. And
That's in
Irvine.
in
yeah, down in Irvine. And they have a library of all this material that you can check out to learn whatever you want. So
big library.
It's a pretty nice, library. It's exactly what you would expect from Blizzard. There's swords and, game tables and all kinds of stuff. And we found in the library Chris's DVDs that you just mentioned that you could check out. So we took a picture of him in what was the smoking chair or whatever in the library to prove that these relics still exist.
It's fantastic. One of our first employees here at Trinity ended up at Blizzard. Harley Huggins was their cinematics director there for many years. So.
Oh wow!
He helped me on Starship Troopers, and then he went out and he was lead cinematics for a good long while.
Oh, cool.
Wow, that's pretty awesome.
So he let me come visit him. I got to see that studio as well.
Yeah,
a few times. Yeah,
nice. Yeah, it's a great campus.
It is. It's impressive.
And by the way, thank you for sending me the reel of your stuff, which I think is pretty amazing because it just shows the amount of different kinds of animation that you guys do. You guys do a ton of different kinds of animation. Obviously, you guys are doing Archer as well, which is kind of on the entertainment side of things. And I definitely want to talk about that process and what you guys do. But there's also just a ton of, just informational animations that just are being made by you guys. What's all that stuff about? Explain that.
Yeah.
This then.
Maybe it's a little bit about being in Kansas City, and maybe it's a little bit about me just enjoying different vertical markets, but we haven't specialized the way other studios just do medical or just legal or just architectural.
Right.
And you see that in our reel. It's true. We just we go out there and we find people who need visuals and we solve problems. And I take that engineering mindset to what they need to do, and we help them with marketing or just visualization or whatever we can do.
Yeah, because you guys, like you said, you guys do a lot of medical videos. You guys do a lot of there was some stuff I saw like geological videos about showing how certain digging is happening, or I guess it seems like explaining videos. Like you can say, of course, someone has to do an animation that explains that because it's too complicated to do it verbally or written down, right? Or just through a series of pictures. The animation is so much clearer to explain that stuff, right?
It's a great solution, and if there's just some compelling need that drives the budget and somebody taking the time to put the project together, it's a perfect fit for us. So we love explaining things. Again, you kind of go back to like the Discovery Channel and just making something so clear when you can with animation.
Right. And I guess it's really cool is especially when you're animating something complex, like a complex piece of machinery or something like that, you get to learn how that thing works, and from an engineering point of view, that's got to be pretty exciting, right?
It's fun. It's like I mentioned, just having the variety of clients means there's something new all the time, and it's always fun. We did one recently for a company that does flour sifting and learned all about industrial flour sifters for
what is that?
A few weeks. Well, when the truck comes up with all the flour to the bakery, they need to run it
Right.
through a sifter first to make sure there's not any paint chips or bugs or anything in it.
Right,
And
right, right.
it's this convoluted machine that drives it all through really, really fast. So I
Wow.
drove out and took pictures and video and just learned all about sifters for a few weeks. So it's just kind of fun.
Yeah, yeah, I think that is kind of fun. It's interesting that all the different kinds of animation you do. Is one of the things. Have you guys ever done legal stuff?
Yeah, fair
You
amount. My
do?
wife's a lawyer, so she advised me a little on some of that.
Yeah, because that's actually a big thing. There's a lot of people that do legal animations.
She was like, "Don't do it. It's awful."
Yeah, I mean, it's not very exciting, right? You're not. The
Right.
thing is, yeah,
It's prejudicial if you make it pretty. You can't make
it-
it pretty.
right.
Yeah.
It has to be as boring as possible so that no one thinks that you're trying to sell them on something, right?
They'll kick it out of court, and then the lawyer that hired you is upset because the
It looked
judge
too good.
judge said it looked too much like that guy's face firing the gun. We did a few.
Oh wow.
We
Yeah.
did a few of them though. We've had a few. Usually something very bad has happened. Also, every one of them is a tragedy. So
Right.
a roof fell in. Somebody's been shot. We've had one of those things
Yep.
like that.
So is one of my good friends who ended up winning the Oscar for Benjamin Buttons. He was the animation director on Benjamin Buttons. One of his early jobs, he was doing legal animation stuff, and he ended up doing the animation for what's his name, OJ's case,
Yes.
and apparently they were upset, and it's like don't make him black. It's like, well, what should I? It's like, so they made him a blue person for some reason, just so they wouldn't be. Just imagine a person, because the whole point was to see
Yeah.
how far he could go in a certain amount of time or whatever it was, and it was. I
Yeah.
was like, yeah, you have to be really careful about that, So
One of our employees left and took a job at a legal firm in Los Angeles, and their demo reel was just one atrocity after another. Somebody getting run
Wow.
over by a car, somebody run over by a bus, somebody falling off a lake, off a boat into the lake.
Wow.
And, it was just sadness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think I could do it. I couldn't
Yeah.
stomach it.
Especially considering the fact that this is not, for some big Hollywood movie starring The Rock, right? This is reality,
Yeah.
things that really happened.
And a lot of them settle out of court when they see all of the facts. 10 minutes
Right.
before showtime, it's all canceled.
Oh, they never
Yeah.
actually see it because
Yeah.
they see, like,
Yeah.
once the video comes up, they're like, well, this is gonna ruin it, right? Yeah.
It may, but for us, nobody sees the work. We've done all the work, and now the show never happens. A lot
Right.
of times with legal animation, they just wrap it up. So
Oof. Yeah, that's tough. That's tough. But okay, but you guys do also, obviously architecture visualization is another big part of what you guys do, which is great. And I saw some of your ArcViz stuff, and that's kind of an interesting field. Is there anything that you feel that each different vertical that you mentioned can sort of learn from the other vertical? Like, is there stuff that you've been able to cross from one to the next?
Oh, totally. That's really one of the great things about working in all these industries and also selling the software and talking to artists is how each vertical market informs the other or inspires it. Or if we're supporting people who have bought V-Ray from us, knowing, that we've been there a little bit and seen that same
Right.
kind of challenge. But there's the work we do that is more beauty oriented can inform some of the work that's a little more technical or just simple technical shots, and adding a little bit of beauty to those to make them better looking. And sometimes clients, especially on the technical and explanatory side, they'll be happy with something that just is workaday solution animation. But if you can show them, look, what if we did this? What if we added this bright light coming from back there? You can add some sparkle, and I think that's part of what you bring to it. I remember the same thing came up in one of the CG garages with Tim Miller talking about blur and Venice, and
Yeah.
how it's our obligation to not just do what the client tells us, but to listen to the client and think about what we can do that takes them one step further. So
Right. You're right. He did say that. Yeah, that's a really good point. I think it's interesting to think about what we what that means in terms of animation. But one of the things that I also found was fascinating, especially when I'm looking at your reel, is that the medical stuff always looks very different. The medical stuff is the one that kind of stood out as something a little bit different. What can you tell me a little bit about the like medical animation and where does that come and how has that changed a little bit in time? Because I don't know much about medical animation or that whole field at all.
Medical animation is one of the best vertical markets right now for animators because it's really hard.
Yeah.
The wireframes are unworkable. It's just a mess. Everything's organic. Everything's curvy.
Organic, yep.
Yeah, and so it's not the sort of thing that just an amateur can just pick up SketchUp and make an anatomical animation real quick. So we
Right.
love it for that reason. We looked at the industry and what other people were doing. We kind of feel like we brought our own aesthetic to those animations. We did about 200 of them, almost all for Elsevier, a publisher out of Amsterdam that does a
Okay.
lot of medical books and nursing books, and this was supporting material. So it was healthy tissue, sick tissue, and solutions and nursing skills. And yeah, I think we brought a really neat kind of lifelike, visceral feel to those ones that we did. They were different.
Yeah, it is. It is very different, and I think it's I always find it really cool to see animations that illustrate something that's going to make it clear to you, right? I mean, we're in the age of people that learn things through YouTube, right? They don't learn things through
Yeah.
pictures anymore, so that they need a moving picture to sort of illustrate something and make it much more sense. And I think that those types of animations are going to be helping people understand how something works. And how things work really seems to be something that's really what you guys seem to be really good at. If I'm going to put everything into all of the different verticals that you do, is like what they really do is they make animations that show people how things work, you know.
Thanks.
And I think that's kind of a really cool idea in general. But one thing that you guys did obviously is these archer animations, and that's a really cool thing. So let's explain to people a little bit, because Archer is a really great thing, and it's a slightly niche in the United States. Some people don't necessarily know about it. I'm sure outside the United States, not as many people know about it, but is a really great animation. And how many seasons we have now? 11?
11. Yeah, we're finishing up the last 2 episodes of season 11 right
Wow.
now.
I can't wait to see it. I've seen everything.
Archer's back in the spy game with this season, which is going to make it a little bit fun.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
After 3 dream seasons.
I can't wait.
Well, let's explain a little bit about what Archer is and what you guys are doing for it.
Well, Archer is a kind of a 007 James Bond spoof, kind of merged with the bickering and infighting of Arrested Development. That's the high concept that starts Archer off.
Yeah.
And I'd have been a fan of the show whether we touched it or not. We were just really lucky. In the early days, they were going to use the same kind of watercolor and illustration backgrounds as they had used in the past. And then also they'd used photography on Frisky Dingo, if you've seen that series, and then
Okay.
just heavily photoshopped it to look more painterly.
Right.
And quickly realized they had a production bottleneck there. And that's when their art director, Neil Holman, took his Lightwave skills and said, can we do backgrounds for a 2D show with 3D and make it look okay? And
Right.
that was when they were on their pilot episode back in 2009,
Okay.
season 1.
Wow.
And then they needed somebody who could handle the 3D, and they are out of Atlanta. They went around Atlanta, and they kind of spread their net farther, and eventually they gave us a chance to audition, and
Okay.
we passed the test and got to work heavily on seasons 1 through 5. So
Wow.
it was great.
So how does
Yeah,
it work? So how to explain the style? Because we'll show a little bit of it, but how does it get that look that looks so cool to it?
It's it's a really great process because it gives a lot of creative freedom for a cartoon. Since they have 3D sets, they can be like Scorsese and they can put the camera in the place that tells the story. Well, you guys know
Right.
that from V-Ray in real life. What a great bunch of camera angles he used on that. Great short film. So on Archer, they'll send us reference photos of things like, let's say it's a police station. Well, what style is it? Modernist or like a 1940s? Or so they'll sketch it out with their own hand as well as provide reference photography, and that's our chance to just go start mocking it, blocking in the basics of the shapes.
Right.
And we worked pretty hand in hand with their scene directors in Atlanta. And at each phase, they're seeing the sets being built up. By then, the storyboard artists have camera angles for the shot, so there's a scene, and they know they're going to want to portray it from different shots. And we go ahead and we put bipeds from Character Studio. We go ahead and use bipeds and pose them, at least roughly.
As stand-ins for the characters?
Yeah, and so they know the green one is Archer and the red one is Pam, and they can use that, especially if the shot is extreme perspective or a lot of foreshortening. It really kind of helps guide the 2D work that they're doing. And at that point, there's the complex challenge of creating everything in layers. So they're going to get a Photoshop with 72 layers.
Wow.
So every table and chair, sometimes every layer of glass, or everything's on separate layers, so that characters can go behind it, and so they can painterize it in different ways. So all of that's delivered to them as a gigantic Photoshop usually. And then they can go in and apply their watercolor style, the Archer look. It's a bit painterly, and it has to match and mesh well with the cell-shaded style. And they do all that with Illustrator, not with Flash. That's why Archer looks so rich. It's a lot more laborious.
So what they get from you guys is a background where everything is broken out into tiny little pieces, right?
And still looks fairly realistic. Yeah.
So it's still rendered as a rendering like a normal render at this point. I'm assuming.
Yeah, and we let the light bounce around, and we do reflections. We really don't get too far from reality at that point. And luckily, Archer's not a real crazy quilt show like SpongeBob or something where verticals are vertical and people are generally 5 to 6 feet tall and all that.
Well, that's pretty okay. So that's pretty interesting. And so obviously, you may have some textures in here and there, but you're keeping the most of the thing that you're focusing on is the perspective, the lighting, and the objects, and the composition of the scene, etc. Right?
Just trying to serve the story and the humor especially.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. And that's and so then they I guess they must have a pretty robust system to convert that to some kind of a vector process in Illustrator, right?
Well, when I said Illustrator, I was referring to the foreground characters, all the actors and stuff. Those are all Illustrator, and then the backgrounds are bitmaps provided by us. So, yeah.
Wow. So it's really just that's pretty amazing. But it still has a little bit of a look to it that sort of matches both worlds pretty well. So it's pretty amazing.
It's a neat look.
I love the look. I mean, that's one of the things that drew me in beyond the sense of humor is awesome. John H. Benjamin I love him as a voice artist.
Yep.
But I was so puzzled by the look because I didn't understand it when I first saw it. I was like, how is this being done? This is magic.
Yeah.
And then of course, when I learned that Jim and team had been working on the environments, I was like, oh, okay, so that makes perfect sense that it is, there's this 3D element because it has this beautiful, like you said, it's got the bounce light and the reality of it, but then there's this wash on top of it that makes it blend with the characters, and man, it's cool. It is a really cool look.
Yeah, the art.
You said season 11's coming out soon?
Well, they had stated May the 6th, but that has now slipped. It's been in Entertainment Weekly and Variety that a date that is TBD.
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense.
I don't know how far out they're going to push.
How far out it'll be.
Crossing our
we'll
fingers.
put this podcast out sometime probably, close to May or around May. And so people should just keep an eye out for the new season coming out. And if you haven't seen Archer, you still have 10 seasons to catch up on me. Get to season 11.
Good time to catch up.
So it's a good time to catch up. And I would definitely recommend doing that because it is a really hilarious show. And I think it was really cool. So you guys have been doing Archer for a long time, I guess, right?
Since 2009, although we mostly worked on the first 5 seasons. I think season 6 and 7, we just got a few pickup shots. Okay. And then season 11, we're back pretty well full time. So they have an internal team, too, that's handling stuff. I believe Floyd County has some other productions that are also, taking the resources, too. So it's been good.
And how many episodes in a season?
When they started out, it was 10s and then 13s. But for the last 4 or 5 seasons, it's been 8-episode seasons. So there's only 8 episodes for this season.
I noticed that that's actually kind of an interesting, like a lot of shows now have actually reduced the amount of shows they do per seasons, but they're giving higher quality content at the same time. So I'm not so disappointed because it used
When
to
did,
be back in the days, when like Cheers or whatever on was like 26 episodes in a season,
yeah,
right? So
Andy Griffith would be like 32.
yeah,
They just get the summer off.
yeah, exactly, exactly.
And I believe they pushed Adam Reed to go to 16 episodes when the show started really gaining in popularity around season 3. And they
Right.
just felt that the quality would suffer, and they stayed with 13.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot to ask for an animation, especially if you're trying to push the boundaries of how it looks, for that
Yeah.
season.
The pressure they're under in the Floyd County production studio is higher than anything we experience. So
Right.
my hat's off to them.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. So, because we mentioned that you were obviously part of the community back in the you know late '90s or mid '90s till now. What have you noticed in the community like that has changed a lot, or what are some of the things that have been sort of adapted or changed and grown in that time? Especially from someone that deals with from the vendor point of view, where you're dealing with customers and dealing different things, as well as someone who's actually using the stuff and creating content at the same time. That's a pretty two great perspectives to have on the industry.
I think the big watershed moment for animators was global illumination. So previous to that, to practical global illumination with V-Ray in particular, we were really illustrators. It was nice looking, but nobody was fooled. And then around, what was it, 05, 06, 07, we started to see Detroit, all the car companies starting to do their literature with renderings. We started seeing some other product shots. So suddenly, instead of this little animation niche, we have product photography 1,000 times bigger, and we're starting to take, animators are starting to get a pretty good chunk of that starting in
Right.
those years. So that was where things, I think, really changed for the applicability of our skills to a much broader world. That was a really
Yeah,
big moment.
I guess you were part of the Max community, so aside from the Lightscape community,
Yeah.
you're probably one of the first groups really in the CG that was really sort of focusing on global illumination a lot more, right? There was a lot of architects that were living in the Max community, a lot of those people. So global illumination was a big part of that group that was actually beyond even the Maya guys or any of those guys, right?
We were using scanline rendering in Max and thought it was good, thought it was
Yeah.
good enough. And I saw what some people were managing to do, and I realized it was a moment where we really had to make a choice. So I had to buy a lot of hardware,
Yeah.
a lot of computers, the fastest, I could get. And then we
Right.
were at the edge where we could do a minute of HD animation flying through a globally illuminated environment even with things that are moving. And when that became possible, that was an exciting time. Yeah.
Yeah. And you think it must have changed everything, right? From
Yeah.
all the different verticals.
At first, like you said, with Lightscape and Final Render from Cebus, you could do stills, but animation still seemed to bridge too far. It was just too much to ask. And so that when that slowly started becoming possible, that really took our architectural animations up just to a whole new level of realism and excitement and
Yeah.
believability. Yeah.
It's true. It's true. Lon, you've been in the GI world for a long time. You were a
Oh yeah,
Lightscape guy.
definitely. In fact, I was one of those poor souls that was rendering Lightscape animation, and rendering it through batch files that you would take and you'd manually input it onto a machine and say, you render these 10 frames. You go onto the other machine, you render these 10
Yeah.
frames. And then I'll never forget a job where we were, we cooked out the solution, we rendered all the frames, and then we had to put in, RPC people that were walking through the frames. And so that scene was obviously all built in Max and then rendered out so that you could composite it into the Lightscape frames. But there was no motion blur. So we ended up taking the motion blur of the scene, and it was the fake motion blur that you got in Max that was sort of smeary.
The 2D
You know?
one?
Yeah, that's kind of 2D motion blur, and we rendered that as a matte pass and put that over the lightscape pass so that it would like smudge it enough that it was like the motion blur pass. And somehow it all came together and it worked, and you know, you're like, ooh, it's but my God, I wouldn't do it again.
Yeah, that's called character building.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
It is good.
It is interesting how so many people have always, like, during that transition time, you know, when like something new was happening, so, and you didn't quite want to fully commit to it, but you would basically go, okay, you know, like, I want GI, but I can't really do real GI, so I'm going to use another pass like ambient occlusion, and I'm going to touch that in a little bit, but still use basically mostly rasterized scanline rendering or whatever it was. And I just remember, like, oh, it looks pretty good, but the reflections are never going to look good. So I'm going to just ray trace that separately in a different renderer and try to blend that in. And it's like, just when people sort of just gave up using multiple renderers to try to, or to get the thing to look right, and just finally just committed to a single renderer, that became a big change, because it's like, you know, it's just, you're just fooling yourself, you know?
Yeah, a lot of people are cobbling together mixed solutions like that from, I'd say, from around early 2000s to maybe 2010. What can we do? We need more computers, or we need to try this just for this one part of the video.
Right.
And it would be a bit of a, you know, we just sort of nailed it all together. It was a lot more elegant when you could just say, okay, we're just going to put it through the render pipeline and get a good result at the other end.
Yeah.
And then you end up sacrificing so much when you do that too, because like the process, I'm sure, of what, you know, Lon described was not very creative.
A lot of human hours, and I can see the clock turning in the time lapse video of Lon working on that.
Yeah.
It's also so much to keep track of, and so many things that can go wrong, right? So like you're introducing all these points of failure that, you know, you shouldn't have to deal with. And I mean, Chris and I joke, we kind of see a little bit of the same sort of thing with some of the real time.
Yeah, that's just what I was going to get at. Yeah.
You know, where it's like we're still trying to hack our way through. Well, maybe we could turn on a reflection here, or maybe we could turn on a little one pass of GI over there. And don't get me wrong, I'm very excited that there's progress, and, you know, we're getting to that point that we can do that stuff in real time. It just, it, you know, it gives me, it gives me nightmares back to like, we need something that can just go and work.
Right.
It's funny, in Unreal, I'm making spherical reflection maps again, as though it were 1994 all over again. It's been I'm seeing all the same early tools from the DOS versions of 3D Studio as they work through smartphones, and the smartphones get better, and real time.
Yeah, well, we were joking too when, you know, VR kind of came back into the mainstream and was taken off, and you know, the most popular was the stereoscopic still image, right? And we're like, this is really just a QTVR, everybody. Yeah. Like, we've been doing this for a long time.
Yeah. I remember doing this in probably 94, 95.
Yeah. Okay, it's a stereo QTVR, which means you've got two images now. Like, cool.
Yeah, I guess it was immersive when you put it in your headset and you could look around. Yeah,
you know, it was effective. And
when I was a kid, I had the ViewMaster too.
Oh yeah,
for a Twinstone.
Yeah. Do you guys remember the QTVR that, you know, you basically have one, and then you'd put the hotspots that would take you to the next spot?
Yeah.
It was, I don't know why it never took off, but it was really cool.
There was another one that would do an animated one, so you could go from one spot to another along a path. You had to choose a path, and it would basically do a QTVR at every frame, so you could go and you could look around, you know, all along a path, which was pretty much VR.
Yeah, it worked okay. We did some VR tours using the same approach. So yeah, you could click the hotspot in the QuickTime, and then you would rush up to it or play an interstitial animation to get to that spot, and now you can look 360 again within that spot.
Yep. Yeah, it was kind of like a zoom warp to the next spot, right?
Indeed, a little like Street View on Google.
Yeah, exactly. That's a perfect analogy of it. Yeah, it was exactly like that. Yeah, I thought it was pretty interesting, and you're right. It is the real time world is suddenly having these same things, right? I remember when I was at Sony and I was working on Ghost Rider, and I swore to, I mean, they basically was the last show on Ghost Rider to ever use their legacy system, which was a system called Burps for lighting, and it was the old RenderMan. And I said, I am never rendering a shadow map ever again. And now I'm realizing, like, if you're going to be doing real time, you probably need to think about shadow maps again.
But the earliest devices, it's like, well, you've got 8 kilobytes for all of your shadow maps, another 8
Right.
kilobytes for your geometry,
Yeah,
Yep.
and suddenly you're back to Quake 1, you know?
yeah, yeah. What was it was interesting. So there's a friend of mine named Josh Shear, who's actually a director and writer over at Naughty Dog. I think he's one of the main guys behind Last of Us 2, which means he's very busy these days. But he was giving a talk apparently to some young kids about video games, and he said back when I was a kid, he says, open your computer, and he says, you see that icon that's like that's telling you, like, Google Chrome or whatever, it's on your thing. It's like that icon takes up 32K. We had to write an entire video game in 8K
Right.
for Atari. It's like that is just gives you an idea. Like just the icon itself is, 4 times the size of what a video game used to take in terms of memory. So
You're wasting all this space.
yeah,
Right? Yeah.
yeah. I wonder if I haven't been following it, but I used to love going to the demo scene stuff. Have you ever know the demo scene guys?
No.
They're the guys who they're supposed to create some kind of a graphic experience or a demo, right? And it's supposed to be an executable, and they're supposed to see how much stuff they can fit into a minimum amount of space. So they write it all in machine language, so it's super, super, super efficient.
Yeah.
But they'll do like these very trippy visual experiences, and it's like 64K, and it's like, what did I just see? So those it's a really kind of it's a combination of super nerdy tech people and then like very visual content as well, and then includes all the music that has to be synthesized through the process and everything else.
I know a little bit about it. I had one of those Timex Sinclair ZX81 little
what I had.
membrane.
Yeah.
Did you learn a little machine code with that for ZX?
You had to.
Chris finally found somebody that had the same equipment as
Yeah.
him. Like we have to,
Not true.
we have
I
to
found
remember this moment forever.
I have had a couple other ones, but yeah, the Sinclair ZX81, and you used to write it on a cassette tape to put your programs on.
It was good
But I think
discipline. It was a little like animation. You had to do everything right and in the
Yep.
right order, and nothing worked.
Nope. Yeah.
Yeah, and we learned a little bit of machine language, and it's pretty good. It was a good starter for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it had 1K of memory on it. And I was always jealous of my friend who had a Commodore 64 because that had,
Yeah.
64 times the memory. And he had a game called Flight Simulator on it. And I did not have Flight Simulator on my on my 1K machine. So I decided I was going to try to write my own flight simulator, which was instrument only.
Yeah.
But it was instrument only, and the only thing I could do was land, and I didn't know anything about aerodynamics, so I just made it up as I went along. But it was like, what's your altitude and speed, and so if you accelerated, it would go up, and and you would just see the numbers go up and down, and whether I came down too fast, I'd crash or not, and it was really just basically just a bunch of numbers of going up and down. But
That's
I didn't
seriously
know anything.
impressive. That's really good.
Yeah.
How old were you?
Oh,
5,
gosh.
15, or 25?
No. I must
38.
I must have been 13 or 14. something
Yeah,
like that.
exactly. That's what I thought. Yeah, that is impressive. That's great. How come? Did you go into engineering?
No, I went to architecture.
Architecture, yeah.
Yeah.
There's mathematical mind in there as well.
Yeah, I did I did some math. I was really into, it was interesting. I was really into computers, but and I loved doing that stuff. But then when I went to actually study computer science in college, I just didn't like I didn't like the faculty, and I didn't like the subject matter, and it was mostly about timing, like literally timing your how efficient your code is. And then after a while, I was like, this isn't creative at all. So I gave up I was doing math and I was doing computer science, and I gave up the computer science part to just do art instead, and it was much better that way.
Wow, we're all sort of technicians that love art, I guess.
Yeah,
There's a lot of musicians in the field, too.
Yep. I think
remember-
music, mathematics, and art are actually, and architecture, they all seem to do really well together as a combination.
We used to see at SIGGRAPHs a lot of guys that used to be in bands, and now they were all working in 3D in different ways. Just sort
Yeah.
of, I guess, comfortable with applying computers and technology to creative endeavors. Seemed
Yeah.
like Gary Yost and the original Yost gang that built 3D Studio, a lot of them were musicians, if I recall.
Probably. Do you play music?
Yeah, I've always played guitar, mainly.
Oh, okay. So yeah, you're part of the band.
Yeah. Taught guitar through college.
Yeah. You did teach guitar, actually?
Yeah, through college, yeah. So
Wow,
it was
okay.
peak hair metal. So I was teaching a lot of Motley Crue songs, and
There you go. There you go.
Nice.
yeah, every kid wants to know them. So.
Yeah, actually, my kid wants to know how to play guitar. He's actually been interested in guitar, and so I'm trying to think about how I'm going to make that happen for him at some point. But I think he's got and I think he's got a big math brain as well. So I think math and there's something about the logic of how music works in terms of progression and stuff and chords that that blends really well with a mathematic mind, I think sometimes.
Yeah, I agree. And also, it's really good to just physically master something once in your life, just where your body meets the world, and getting really comfortable with playing an instrument is a great way to just, it's motor skills and your mind and living in the moment. It's a different thing than other disciplines, and I think it informs a certain kind of thinking. It's
Yeah.
good to have that. Good to have done that at least once. Some people
Well,
do
he-
skiing or baseball. That counts
Yep.
too.
He's got some pretty good muscle memory on a game controller, I can tell you that.
Excellent.
But yeah, I think you're right. I think it's good to have that discipline that that's something you can do and something is come back to. And the cool thing about, especially about music, and I'm sure you can agree to this, is you can always pick up a guitar, right?
Yeah.
And a guitar is available, and it doesn't always have to be plugged in. You can have it completely unstrung or unplugged, and and that's something you can always do. And that's something I've actually always envied about people who play musical instruments, because I don't always have that freedom. So.
It's a delight, man.
but
It's
you're-
worth it. Yeah.
Yeah, but there is actually, going back to your animation. I mean, obviously, you were mentioning the fact that you learn all this stuff about these new things, and your engineering background also was an influence from you. So figuring things out and understanding that was, did that influence your music as well?
The kind of math and engineering mindset.
Well, the
influenced
figuring
my
things
music.
out, like there's a met, obviously you learn music as you learn music, but there's also something like how you learn the music and how you try to get it accomplished. There's something about your engineering. Did you think your engineering mind that influenced your music mind, or was that always two separate things?
The really hard part in music is usually pre-college. Usually it's when you're 10 to 18 years old. You got a lot of time. You don't
Yeah.
mind that you're terrible. And you
Right.
and especially pre-YouTube, you had to just play the record and figure it out yourself. There was no useful tablature in that era that you could figure songs out with usually.
Right.
So that was a good discipline, just like you're talking about, Lon with Lightscape and you with your aircraft landing tool. You just pound through it, and it really informs a lot of your skills that you just keep trying and trying. And when I was a teacher, I had a lot of kids and a lot of adults, and everybody always said the kids were faster learners and better students. But what I found was adults couldn't tolerate as well being terrible, because you're always terrible. If I picked up the violin, it's a year at least, I'm going to be a terrible violin player, and
Right.
and you're going to hear yourself being terrible. And adults were too quick to just say, "Oh, I'm terrible," or to say
Right.
that someone's a natural. And kids don't mind; they've got all the time in the world, and they just try, and eventually, the positive feedback comes, and it drives them to even more practice or more joy with the instrument, and it's a positive feedback loop. So
Yeah, I noticed that with like skiing, like adults are like learning how to ski. They never want to learn how to ski because they don't want to look like not uncomfortable on skis, right? But kids are like, I don't care. I just want to
Yeah.
barrel down the mountain. You know?
Yeah, I mean, there is also the fact that kids are a little bit more bendy. So when you fall as a kid, you're lower to the ground. It doesn't hurt as much.
Sure.
true.
As you get older, skiing is like, well, I could break my arm.
Yeah. But
Well,
okay, but let's bring up that idea of learning, right? Back in the 90s and stuff, there was no YouTube or or things of that nature, and these days when people are learning things, especially like including 3D and animation, there is a ton of resources for people to do. Do you think
yeah.
there's something lost in just having instant access to know everything, or do you think that's just a blessing?
It's pretty much, I'd veer towards pure blessing. Only thing is just the perseverance that you gain some skills at, the willingness to just keep pounding at something that's a problem.
Right.
If you lose some of that because if you can't find a quick solution, you just give up. That would be the only possible downside. When I started in the early days of 3DS DOS, there was like 1 or 2 books out. I recall Michel Bousquet wrote one of the first books on 3D Studio DOS, and
Yeah.
I bought it the first day and just poured through it. It was the first person who took time to translate the tools to art and just give you some ideas about how that's being done. And later I wrote the Maya Fundamentals series for Pearson. That
Right.
was a pretty popular set of books for people learning Maya.
Yeah.
And same thing, you just are trying to work through those challenges.
Yeah, I think it was interesting because those were those like I've got the book, right? And it was the book. That was it. You only
Yeah.
had
Yeah.
that one book, and it was in my fundamentals is a perfect example. That was a very very important book. Anyone who was going to learn Maya, you started with that, right? And that's the resource you had. But now you can go and just go on YouTube and say starting Maya, and you'll get like 25 different points of view, right,
Yeah.
about it. And actually, honestly speaking, sometimes I find it very frustrating because I'll see some guys like, oh, teaching you how to use V-Ray in something, and I'm like, oh no, that's
Yeah.
the wrong way to do it, right?
Yeah.
Or worse, and I'm actually at fault here as well. You brought it up that the Gnomon DVDs, people still talk about the method that I was talking about, Gnomon DVDs, and those DVDs are 13 years old, 14 years old, and people
Yeah.
say, no, this is the way you do it. It's like that is a very, very long time ago.
Don't need it. Use the defaults.
Yeah, and so people still, so the problem is that you don't. It's hard to bless the true way of doing things, right? When you wrote Maya Fundamentals, like Autodesk, and actually wasn't, it's Alias Wavefront probably at the
Yes,
time, right?
Alias, yeah.
So they basically like, no, this is correct. This is how it should be. It was blessed by them. They knew it. You had a relationship with them, etc. But nowadays, if how I use Maya, you got some guy somewhere who's using a cracked version of Maya saying this is what you do, and like, no, not exactly.
Well, YouTube is like, in a way, everybody can post their work, and it's a blessing and a tragedy because
Right.
there's a lot of wrong solutions or partially correct. Usually when people ask me, I'll send them more to like lynda.com or digitaltutors.com, which is now Pluralsight, I think.
Pluralsight.
Yeah, because there's a little more care taken in what they're presenting and making sure they have somebody who's an authority. It's a little
Right.
better, yeah.
Yeah, but
You got to have some barriers to entry, or you just get everything.
Yeah, yeah, but I think it's a really good thing also because if you decide you're going to pick up a new skill, no matter how old you are, like this, I decided because I'm stuck at home now, I'm going to start picking up fly tying because I'm doing some fly fishing. So that's great. Like suddenly I go on YouTube and it's like there is a lot of resources on tying flies, And I will actually advise this to people, especially if you're dealing with anxiety, which a lot of people are dealing with anxiety right now. Watch someone tying a fly. It is one of the most meditative experiences of just seeing this little thread wrapping around a feather, and is like that's going to help relax a lot more. So, but there is a lot of resources for anything that you want to learn, which I think is great. But it is hard to know what's correct and what's not. And I think you're right. Finding resources that are going to be able to that you're going to be able to trust.
Yeah, the internet deals with that over and over. Wikipedia, early
Right.
Turbo Squid, a
Yep.
lot of these, everybody can post, and some people's, they just haven't really, they don't know that they don't know yet.
Right.
Right.
Nothing
True.
against them. I appreciate their contribution, but they don't know that they need a little more knowledge before they start standing up on the milk carton and telling us all.
Yeah. Yeah. It's true. It's true. there's so listen, we're kind of rounding the corner here, and I'd like to know like a little bit more about. Obviously, you were gonna be able to come to Total Chaos, which is unfortunate that it's no longer happening. So I'm really glad you were able to at least be part of the podcast.
Thank you.
But tell us a little bit. I mean, were you going to be able to talk about anything at Total Chaos, or are you just going to come to hang out in Sofia, or?
Do you mean the one that is happening, that was going to happen in
Mhm.
2020?
Yep.
Well, yeah, they had invited me to come talk about Archer, so I was excited to come show off our techniques and answer questions and show off some of the elements of background creation.
Yeah.
I went to Total Chaos 2018 and just loved seeing Sophia and the gang at Chaos Group and the city and everything. It was just, both my wife and I just really fell in love with Bulgaria and the experience of, just sort of seeing this great city and touring it. So I was really excited to be coming back in 2020 and not just being an attendee, but having a little bit of, participation this time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was one that I was really looking forward to as well. So we'll, let's all hope that it happens 2021.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right. And hopefully that gives the world enough time to recover. And we definitely got to have you there. Maybe we'll be talking about season 12.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I was thinking in the back of my mind, Chris, is the Archer environments are kind of an interesting case for Lavina.
Oh, possibly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because they're sort of an outdoor environment. You could be rendering that stuff ray traced in real time.
Yeah.
So maybe we've even got a little bit of an experiment we can do on that.
Yeah.
The only trick being, there's a lot of layers and things that you've got to render out. So maybe you have to kick it back over to to render it out final out of V-Ray. But there might be some interesting stuff we could do with Lavina. So we'll have to reconnect on that front in the meantime and see what we can do there.
We'd love to explore that. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm excited. I'm excited of all the stuff you're doing, and I'm really excited the fact that you've been around for a long time, and Trinity's been around for a long time, and I've always used them as a resource. And so your name, I've known your name forever. I've known of your name long before I met you. So when I met you for the first time, oh my God, it's Jim Lammers. So I was really excited. I think the first time we met in person, I believe. I don't think you know this, but I remember it. You were at New Orleans in 2000. Am I right? At SIGGRAPHs?
Yes.
Yeah. I think that's the first time I met you in person.
Fantastic. Yeah. I remember that was when Turbo Squid had their huge party.
Yeah, exactly.
Celebrating their beginning.
I was there, I think. So
Yeah.
I think that's where I met you, is one of those big events over there.
This
And it was
great SIGGRAPH.
was because
That
they
was
were based-
2000 or 96? 2000.
It was in 2000.
Yeah.
It was in 2000.
That was the biggest SIGGRAPH ever. Remember, it was before the .com crash. It was like a city. It was just there was environment fog. It was so big. From one end of the show to the other, it was like a city where the booths got taller as they got farther from your view. And then the next year, it was like a Peanuts Thanksgiving. There was just like 3 card tables.
Yep. Exactly. You nailed it. I think I remembered the one thing that I remembered the most about that SIGGRAPH that had me cracking up was, I think it was Sun Microstation back when Sun was still around. They had this is when people had booths that the booths were like 2 stories with like, dancers everywhere. Like it was crazy. Right. And sometimes you have people like, why is Sun here? And they would show something that had nothing to do with their product. It was just to get people to go to their booth. And they had a very large aquarium there. And inside the aquarium, barely contained inside the aquarium, was an animatronic dolphin. Right. And so there was probably maybe like 2 feet on each side of the dolphin. That's how big the aquarium was. But it was a full-size dolphin animatronic that had like an umbilical cord with a cord coming out, and he would go like, woo, and it was moving up and down. And it looked pretty real for a while. And then you come close and realize like, oh, it's animatronic. Well, then at one point, I guess I came by like one of the days and I saw a big SPCA truck outside of And they thought
they were abusing
they had
a
a real
dolphin.
dolphin inside this aquarium inside the convention center. And I was
Oh.
like, nope. Yeah, it's pretty funny.
I recall they were selling like AOL discs and domains. Like they had the island of Tuvalu there selling the .tv domain, and all
Wow.
these very peripheral elements of animation were at this incredibly big SIGGRAPH show. And I would think I was exhibiting at SIGGRAPH 2000. So I was
Yeah,
just
you might have
busy
been,
as could be. I think I was working with Cebus in those days, and we had Final Render 1.0, I believe, at SIGGRAPH 2000. So,
Right.
yeah.
Yep. That would have
think-
been about the time.
I think my wife tells me this story about because that was her first SIGGRAPH she ever went to, and so she was just walking around with a bag, just collecting swag like crazy. They had a competition in the morning, see how many T-shirts you could get. That's when those people were just throwing them at you for free. But she was exhausted because he said you could see the environment fog in the convention center.
It was
And so
huge.
she was really tired, and she ended up. They had the one booth had these giant Barcalounger chairs that you could unfold, and they were playing the pod races from Star Wars on the big screen, and they were just sitting down. It's like, oh, I can finally relax and sit down and just watch the pod races. And she looked at the guy next to her, and the guy looks and says, "Do you know what they are selling here?" And she goes, "No, I think it's hard drives." Like they had no idea. They were just sitting down.
Yeah.
Getting.
And then when you're
Those days have gone,
when you're an
unfortunately.
exhibitor, they come and they go, "What is this whole rendering thing?"
Yeah. Yep.
Well, do I have to explain it from the ground up
Yeah.
at my booth in the middle of the day? Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
Yep. It was. I always tell this joke about Zaha Hadid. She was giving a talk at Rice University, and there was, because she's a big name architect, there's a bunch of people that come that want to see Zaha Hadid talk about architecture that are not necessarily in university, but they just want to go see an architecture lecture. But she's talking to mainly students and people that know their stuff in terms of the what it takes to do architecture. And so some guy who was probably in his 60s or 70s says, "I notice you use a lot of computers for your design. Do you use the Adobes?"
Yeah.
And like, yeah, okay. A little bit harder question. Yeah.
It's pretty
And like
funny.
you said, like, what is rendering?
Yeah, no, that's a question I've had to answer many times myself, Jim. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
And I usually start with, dragons aren't real, right?
That's
Good way
really
to put it.
funny. Yeah.
That's like the barometer of like where we have to start this conversation.
Yep.
Yeah, when you're on the show floor, you're already your voice is getting tired, and you're trying to interact with people. You have about 1 minute per person, so getting hit with a really broad question, it's sort of like, you talk to my competitor over there.
Right. Yep. That's true. All right. Well, Jim, thanks so much for being on. I really appreciate it. This is going to be great.
Thank you. It's been an honor to be a part of the CG Garage podcast. I really appreciate it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jim. It's good to see you. And like I said, we'll circle back with you about, hopefully Total Chaos 2021.
Can't wait. I'll be there.
Awesome.
Yeah. Excellent. Thanks, guys.